Hi, everybody. How are you?
Yeah.
Excellent. So,
It's falling. It's good.
Olivia and Reagan are going to show their faces. So if anybody else wants to too, we don't even care if you've taken a shower, do we, Olivia? We don't care. But it is kind of strange to try to talk to blank pages. I'm used to it, but for Olivia and Reagan's sake, if any of you want to show your beautiful faces, it might not be a bad thing. But then again, if I didn't have to take a shower this morning, I wouldn't have. So I can understand. Oh, yay, there's Alexia. Hi, Alexia. How are you? Excellent. Here comes Autumn. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Excellent. All right. Are you all excited about Thanksgiving break? You're all leaving campus except, I think, is it Autumn? You have to stay for basketball, right? But otherwise people are going to go home. Is that right? Olivia, are you going home?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. Do you have to take things down from your dorm room or can you just leave everything as is?
I'm leaving everything up. I'm staying until finals.
Oh, good. Okay. Wow. I didn't know that was possible. I mean, you can still get food on campus and everything?
I think it's crazy how every other person I know that goes to other colleges, they're like, you have the whole week off? Like, I only have Wednesday through Friday. I'm like, I wonder why.
It was decided, sorry, I'm changing so that glare from the window. And now you get to see my artwork on the wall. Sorry about that. Okay. We decided long ago at the beginning of the semester that we wouldn't do the fall break like we usually do in the middle, like at the beginning of October, and we would put it in with Thanksgiving, mostly because we wanted to make sure that students didn't come back to campus after Thanksgiving and bring the virus with them. So that was always kind of the plan, but yeah, I agree. I'm looking a little bit too much forward to this week off, and then I have to remember, like, I've got all this grading to do. Like, finally I'll get a break and I can do my grading. So it's kind of a break and kind of not a break, but it'll be fine. It'll be good. We're actually going to get a little cabin in the woods for Thanksgiving because we can't see anybody. So we're renting a little cabin and we're going to go hiking all during Thursday and Friday. So
yeah, I'm going to use it for studying for finals.
Yeah.
Because all of my family Thanksgivings are
canceled, right? Like it's not, yeah, which is smart considering that St. Louis now is, do you guys know what the percentage of positive rate is for COVID? Over 23%. So yeah, it's crazy. Like New York City is shutting down schools because it's at 3% positivity rate, and we're at 23% positivity rate in the St. Louis County area. So yeah, it's everywhere. So be careful, everyone. Just be careful, stay safe, take lots of really great walks if you can. Go. Oh, Reagan, are you kidding?
Yeah,
Look,
I have.
Is that thing alive?
There's 4 of them. Yeah, she's like sitting on my lap. There's one right there, and then one's like laying on a dog bed over there, and then I don't know where the other one is. But yeah, so 4
of them.
Yes, you might hear barking. They're crazy. But this one,
4 of them.
Me, apparently.
I have 2 cats, and people think I'm a little whoop whoop. But I would love to have.
We're crazy.
2 more cats. Yeah. I don't know. Having this thing love you so conditionally, like a dog or a cat. My cats love me. There's something really special about that, Reagan, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's because they can't really speak, so you can just project whatever.
I can pretend that they love me.
It's not like, oh, they really love me. When really it's like, you smell good and you feed me. So
Yeah, you're warm.
You know, it's probably not a whole lot deeper than that, but I
That's okay.
can infuse this relationship with so much more meaning than if I were,
Yeah.
you know, hey, that's okay. I'll take it. All right, I'm gonna shut up now, and Olivia and Reagan, you are officially the teachers.
Okay. So we both picked like 2 questions to go over and see how far that gets us. So I'll start.
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. So I was going to do number 4. So I'll read it off. As always, whenever I want to get rid of someone I'm not really listening to, I made it appear as if I agreed. And this is on page 69. And I thought this was like really significant. I'll just see what you guys think, and then I'll put my own feedback. So the questions I asked is, what does this quote say about Merceau? Does Merceau's actions correlate with his actions he has consistently been making throughout this book? And how does this action affect the examining magistrate? And what does that show about society? So if anybody wants to answer their own, or I can say my opinion and see what others.
It's definitely something I can relate to, because it's easier to say, yeah, I see what you mean. And then, you agree so that they go away, not because you're actually thinking about what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like he was definitely playing the game, and he hasn't been doing that this whole time. And then he's at this point, or in this specific moment, he's like, oh, I just want to get them off my back. So that's, and then the reaction of the examining magistrate was kind of like, he got the reaction he wanted. Merceau got the reaction, because then the examining magistrate was like, oh, good, so you think the way I think, and like that. And he was just trying to get him off his back. Anybody else?
I definitely think, though, when asked directly, he denies it. So when he said, like, I act like I agree, probably is doing something like this, nodding his head, something fairly innocuous, giving just little signals like he's not going to push back. So he didn't necessarily say he said anything to agree. He probably was just like, and the magistrate kind of jumped on that. But when he asked him directly, Deroux told him the truth. And I wonder, so it's probably like, what Laura says, how we get through Thanksgiving dinner with some of our relatives, right? Like we just kind of nod along to some of their like more, crazier or whatever, because we don't want confrontation. But what happens if they ask you directly, like, do you agree with me? Or you would blah, 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 blah. At that point, Laura, would you say, no, I don't actually? Does that make sense? Like, where is that line? So I think you're absolutely right, Olivia, that to some extent he'll play the game, but when asked directly, when he has to make that, maybe cross that line between, playing the game to simplify his life to some extent, but having to lie, he doesn't go that far, does he? Like he still hasn't necessarily lied. He might just kind of in order to get people off his back.
Yes, yeah, I talked about that in
like
mine.
up to a certain point, right? Yeah.
Where was it?
Like even with Marie, he'll tell her, I don't really love you, but then the next minute he kisses her. And for some of us, we're like, well, wait a minute, you can't just kiss a woman, like, so it's funny because his actions are, but think about this, everybody, this is kind of an interesting, maybe this is the interesting distinction, is that sometimes actions are up for interpretation. Does that make sense? Like words are too, for sure. But actions are kind of up for interpretation. So it's almost like he'll act in a way so that people can interpret, if they want to, his feelings or his motivations. But if somebody asks him directly, he's going to tell them. So he's going to act like he really loves Marie, like he's going to kiss her and he's going to have sex with her and he's going to hold her hand. You know what I mean? But if she asks him directly, he's going to say, well, I don't think it matters much, but I don't think so. And I think that's the line for Merceau. I think for him, the line is, he doesn't care how other people interpret him. And that's something we've talked about this before. Like, that seems so foreign to most of us, that he doesn't really seem to care too much. I mean, a little bit maybe, but he doesn't seem to care too much how he's interpreted by other people. He's going to allow them the freedom to think about him however they want to. Does that make sense? Like, he doesn't seem really concerned about controlling his own narrative, how people perceive him. And if asked directly his feelings, or asked directly what the truth is, he's going to try to say it as plainly as possible, so that there isn't any misinterpretation. Like when the magistrate says, well, can I say, I thought about you, Kyle. I don't know if when you read this, you were like, oh. So on page 65, when the magistrate said, he asked me if he could say that day I had held back my natural feelings for my mom, and that's why I didn't seem upset. I said no, because that is not true. So at that point, Meursault seems to be saying, whatever I felt for my mom, at that moment, it didn't matter as much as being annoyed with the heat. That it's not that he had these really deep feelings for his mom that he was like suppressing, that those, he said, I don't know, this is such a puzzling thing to me, everybody. He said, I probably did love my mom, but that didn't mean anything. At one time or another, all normal people have wished their loved ones were dead. Okay, I'm gonna shut up because that is disturbing. I mean, Olivia and Reagan, how did you deal with that when he said, I probably did have feelings for my mom. I probably did love her, but that didn't mean anything. At one point or another, every person has wished their loved one dead. I mean, first
Wow,
of all,
did you just memorize that?
well, I've read this so many times, so yeah.
Wow.
So the two of you, like, how did you do, anybody out there, when you read that, where you're like, this is one cold-hearted bastard, or do you think?
I was like, I'm looking at a mirror of myself.
Yeah, I could definitely relate with it. I mean, I think it's like part of you like really loves your family, but then like you get annoyed with them, and so you're like, I just wish like they weren't even here. Like, but so I feel like it's natural. I mean, his wording is very like makes it seem really dark, but
well, if you also think about
kind of natural.
I wouldn't go as far as like saying they're dead, but not being in the presence, like being in my presence, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, especially like I'm coming back to college after Thanksgiving because I'm gonna need that break. Even though I'm going back once winter break comes, so just that 2 weeks. Laura, what were you gonna say?
Oh my God, is anybody else listening to this?
if you really think about it, oh my gosh, I had it and then my bad.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Well, this is a good sign. We're stumbling over each other because you have so much to say. That's good.
It does sound horrifying though.
I mean,
it's really disturbing.
Oh, I remember what he said. What I was going to say. When he says, I probably loved my mom, it's natural to love your guardians or whoever's taking after you. It's just human nature. But when he says it doesn't matter, his love is not going to stop her from dying. Dying is also human nature. So that's why it's like, yeah, I probably loved her because it's what humans do, but she's also going to die.
Yeah, and he also made the quote at some point where he said like one of like either the lawyer or the magistrate asked him like if he loved his mom, and he said, I probably loved her as much as anyone else would. So yeah, I don't know.
I think that's really that was really weird for me to read, because like who says that? Like even if you believe that, like who would like just say that? And definitely that's why the lawyer was like getting upset and saying like do not say that during your case, because that's going to make him look so guilty. If he can just like show no emotion towards anyone, what's going to stop him from killing someone and caring at all? And so I definitely think that's why the lawyer made such a big deal about it.
So Autumn, you're saying like, I have never wished a loved one dead. Y'all are, something's wrong with you. But can I just give a quick scenario, because I've done this before and I'm going to be just totally honest. I hope I don't get judged too harshly. but every once in a while, usually it's when I'm taking a shower, because that's the only free time I ever get, away from this crazy life of my children. Every once in a while, if I'm in a really weird, dark mood, I'll imagine like my husband dying, or I'll imagine what it would be like to lose my sister. And I'll even like get myself to a point where I'm crying, or I'm thinking about what I would say during their eulogy or something. Has anyone ever
I
done
have
this
definitely
before?
done that,
And it's like
Yeah.
really,
especially like
really bizarre. Like, I don't know if it's wishing that somebody was dead, but it's sort
that
of like,
scenario.
Yeah, just like
Well,
thinking
yeah,
about
and
what would
also-
happen.
yeah, but also y'all realize like that's the height of a kind of egotism, like I'm gonna, like, what would I say in this moment? How would I act in this moment? Like, talk about being the main character in a bizarre like plot twist. And so like for all of his faults, Mirceau isn't projecting himself to be like the victim. Like he could have in this scenario again been like, my mom died, I was really upset, la 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 la, attention on me, I'm the main character. And he's not really concerned about being, having the spotlight on him, or having like controlling the narrative or the story about his relationship with his mom. And to me, that's really striking. So Autumn, I have to admit, I don't know if I've ever like wished someone dead, like, oh, it'd be so much better if they did. But I have thought about what their death would mean and how I'd react and what I would say. And, even at one point when I was younger, like what I would wear. I mean, like bizarre crap like that. So I don't know. I'm just gonna, that sounds really egotistical, so I'm gonna shut.
Okay, we can go on to another question. So I chose number 1. On my way out, I was even going to shake his hand, but just in time, I remembered that I had killed a man. What does this quote say about Marceau and how quickly he forgot about his previous actions? And why do you think that Marceau feels as if he cannot shake the examining magistrate's hands? Anybody?
It definitely shows how in the present he is, because when it's almost really casual how he says, "Oh yeah, I forgot I killed a man," but as it did, he was so focused in the now that he forgot how he got to that now. And when he remembered that, oh yeah, the Arab's kind of dead, he was he was trying to be cordial with the magistrate, and he realized if I try to shake his hand, he's probably going to be even more weirded out, or think, well, not even he wasn't really too worried about what the magistrate was thinking of him, but he's like, he would not shake his hand, thinking about the other way around.
Can I say something? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I said that he's so used to living his life, and he doesn't see himself as a monster. But I think the moment he had his action, with killing the man, these people only see him as a stranger. They have never met him in his life, so they don't see him as the mere salt that everyone else knows. So he realizes that, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just a monster to them, so I shouldn't shake his hand." I think that's how I kind of interpreted it.
Yeah, I think part of it is like he like doesn't have not any feelings, but like stuff like doesn't really affect him. And so like the fact that he like killed a man, he still feels like a normal, quote unquote, normal human. And so I think that's like why he like forgot, not that he forgot about what he did, but it's like he almost realized, oh, they've labeled me as this like monster now, like what Nick was saying, instead of like being a casual human who hasn't murdered somebody. And he almost doesn't feel like he's like good enough to like shake their hand because they view him that way.
Well, if you look at him too, like when we feel the weight of others' gazes on us and like judgment of our character, so like the fact that they see us as a murderer or monster, it kind of breaks us down on the inside. So I'm seeing Mersalt right now, and he's just like, wow, all these people see me as like a monster, as like, he was called the Antichrist by that one guy. And like, you got to realize how much pressure, mental pressure that puts on him.
Yeah, he's starting to view himself like everybody else views him instead of just like viewing himself like how he did previous to this.
Can we relate this at all to Camus' first story, The Guest?
Yeah, I mean, I think like with the Arab,
Yeah,
like
actually, we can. Wait.
he go ahead, Nick. Okay. Well, like I was gonna say, like with the Arab, like he didn't feel like he deserved to have like any like good treatment or anything. And so then like when he did, like it was kind of surprising to him. And I think it's kind of like the opposite for Merceau. Like I don't know. That makes
I would
sense.
say that they both have these personalities that are different than everybody else. Like with the Drew, am I saying that name right? Drew. Drew was the one who took pity on the Arab and was like nice to him, or like was nicer than the other people. And then in this situation, Merceau has a different personality than everybody else because he's not playing the game like society does. So that's how I would relate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that part of Drew's problem with taking the Arab to prison is that this human being was being judged by this one single action, and that the judicial system, I mean, this Arab was already guilty. Does that make sense, everybody? He was already guilty. He was already, the story had already been told. He didn't really have a chance of proving that he was a human being, a subject. He wasn't, we can tell Balducci didn't judge the Arab as a subject. The judicial system wasn't going to judge him as a human being, right? Like he was lesser than. And you can see Daru kind of struggling with this, that he has to keep reminding myself, oh yeah, I'm a criminal, that his whole life is going to be summed up, that other people are going to be looking for a reason to say that he is, a monster. And I think he's kind of struggling with that a little bit about other people, like calling Mansour Antichrist, and he says that he can tell he was making other people uncomfortable because they couldn't figure him out, right? He could tell that they couldn't understand him. And that was what was really making these other people uncomfortable. I think somebody put in there that, nobody's even mentioned the Arab. It's not that he killed an Arab, that Daru is being treated like a monster or a criminal. Does everyone see that? Like, it's clearly not because he shot an Arab. It's clearly because this man doesn't process, emotions, doesn't fake emotions, however you want to phrase it, like the rest of us do. And
the other Arabs in prison didn't even have a reaction to him saying, they were kind of like,
well, they laughed when they saw him. Does anybody understand? Like, it says he showed up to jail and they laughed. Anybody know why the Arabs would laugh?
Well, they laughed until he mentioned he killed one of them.
That's right. And then they went, I think they laughed because it's so strange to see a white man in jail. Like, he was the only one there. They were like, what is going on? Why are you here? And it was only when he said he killed one of them that they were like, ooh, okay. So yeah, he's definitely a stranger even in jail. He doesn't have a community, he doesn't have any fellowship, really. Yeah. So I think you can kind of see and hear that in the justice system, the way that it's being portrayed in here, you're not going to be necessarily judged just on your actions. And we all know this, right? I mean, this is part of the judicial system where I've always said that it makes me extremely nervous to think that 12 fellow citizens would be judging my guilt or my innocence, because it really depends. For me, I'm like, that makes me really squeamish, because it means that will my actions really be judged? Can they be judged objectively? Or is it mostly whether they like you, whether they like how you dress, whether where you live, how you come off, how you speak, what's really going into that thought process of a person's innocence or guilt? We all know historically in this country, A lot of times it had to do with the color of your skin, how much money you made, whether people identified with you or not, and much less with just the sort of what happened in that moment. Does that make sense, everybody? And we can start to see this here, that it's not the killing of the Arab that has him in so much trouble. It's that he didn't cry at his mother's funeral. That's why he's in jail right now. That's why he's being seen as an antichrist.
I thought it was interesting how in The Guest, they pretty much knew that the Arab was he was basically going to his death sentence, like he was going to jail. But it seems here that they have a certain level of confidence that they can get him out of it. And you just have to think like it's because he's not an Arab. If an Arab did that, he would for sure go to jail. But all these people are saying like, I want to help you, like, just tell me this, and I think we can get you out of the situation.
Yeah, and as I told you before, right now the stakes are really high for him. You know, like Mirso, if you just tweaked your story a little bit, you know, you'd be fine. He'd be fine. He'd get out of this. And I think that's part of the reason why everyone is so frustrated with him. You know, it's like, let us spin a story here. Let's take the facts of the case and spin them a certain way so that you seem like you're a caring, loving, regretful, remorseful human being, and he won't let them do it. Yeah, Laura, you brought up a really great point. You said Mirso is a strange case. He says his mother's idea that a person will grow used to anything after a while, right? Agree, murder is no small matter, but for Mirso, it reflects just how odd he is. Yeah, and that he can get used to jail, right? Like even jail is, you know, your reality is really just more of a frame of mind, your perception, than where you are.
Mercer also, like, he physically not physically, he actually mentioned this in his like experience of being in prison, where he says, I'm so used to being free, I want the water, I want the water on my feet, I want the women, and he's like, but I'm in jail. And I realize that's the exact reason for being in jail, is to take away your privilege. And he's made I don't remember if it's like a head guard or something similar of that position, but he made a reasonable relationship with the person who's like a jailer or some sort. And he's like, yeah, you can't have your cigarettes because that's a privilege. And he's like, oh, so that's just part of the punishment. And he just grew used to it over time.
What do you think is significant about that? What do you think Camus is trying to tell all of us? I mean, it might not be the most subtle of metaphors, but I think part of this is what Camus is saying, is that we think of ourselves as being free. You know, Sartre brings this up all the time. Oh, we live in a free state, I'm a free person. And most of us have confined ourselves to a type of either mental prison or actual physical prison. I went up for my master's. I went to Truman State, which is in Kirksville. It's a really tiny little town. But the university did a great job at showing movies every weekend and bringing up symphonies and concerts and speakers. Oh my God, I heard so many Pulitzer Prize and Nobel Prize winning writers up in Kirksville. It was really amazing. And I remember coming back, you know, to St. Louis and to my friends, and they were sort of like, how could you live up there? Because there's nothing to do. And after a couple of months in St. Louis, I realized they didn't do anything. Like, they went to the same restaurant every weekend. They had, you know, here's St. Louis, and St. Louis is amazing. We have Fox Theater, we have Powell Symphony Hall, we have concerts going on all the time. We have plays and opera. We have an opera, St. Louis. I mean, we have so much to do. And most of the friends I knew didn't do any of it, you know? So they thought of Kirksville as being like a prison because there wasn't much to do, but they had effectively concentrated their bubble so it was about this big. Does that make sense, everybody? You know, and I think what Camus is trying to say is that we all get you, like, we also are living in our own prisons, and we get used to it. We get used to like the tightening of control and the tightening. And as the underground man said, if you were to open the door up to many prisons, like, you know, you put a dog in a prison for long enough, that dog, even if you open the door, that dog's not going to want to come out because they're used to the prisons. The underground man said the same thing. If we were given the choice of okay, you don't have to live this life. You don't have to go to Lindenwood. You don't have to live with your parents, Olivia. You know, you could do anything you wanted. You'd probably be like, oh, let me get back into that cage, please, because it's familiar and it's nice and it's comforting. And so I think, Marcel, the larger point is that we've all done this to a certain extent. We've all kind of put ourselves into this enclosed, limited space, limited opportunities, and we get, quote unquote, used to it. Think about, you know, Gregor. Eventually he got used to being a bug, right? He got used to having limited activity. Like, it's amazing what you'll get used to because you sort of learn to limit the scope of your mental framework. Yeah, so there you go. All right, Olivia, Reagan, anything else that you wanted to bring up?
You just went right, Reagan.
Yeah.
So I will go on to question 5. What is the significance of the news story that took place in Czechoslovakia? Nailed it.
Czechoslovakia, yes.
How'd you say it?
Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
The
What do you
beautiful
think-
country. Visit it if you can. It really is beautiful.
Czechoslovakia.
Yeah,
Just
don't eat
as
the
beautiful
fish.
as
That's all I gotta
the
say.
name is.
Totally sick eating the fish there. So don't eat the fish. But otherwise, it's a beautiful country.
My grandfather actually immigrated from there. So like my
What part?
last name.
What part? Oh
Um,
yeah.
I actually
You know-
never really asked him because he would actually died before I was born
Okay.
of a heart attack. But my dad used to say he like would speak Czech at the table like all the time. Like it'd be like English and Czech, and like it'd be a mixture of both. But
So cool.
so that's where my last name actually comes
Kafka's from
from.
Czechoslovakia. So there you go.
Oh, really cool.
Maybe you got a connection to Kafka there, Nick.
I'll have to ask my dad. But I thought the story was significant because it was about a man who lied to his mother to like kind of flaunt his wealth and his success. So he like surprised her, but it ended up causing him also his greatest downfall. It caused him to die and his mother to kill herself. So I think that was Camus actually telling the readers themselves that, hey, don't play society's game. Don't be arrogant, but rather be open and honest, and like actually say what you're going to say, because it actually could save your life, and bad things can happen if you choose to play the game. So I think that's how I kind of took it.
It could also go the other way around too. Why would his family jump on a guy who is obviously rich? Like, don't do that. But things don't have to result in violence. So the fact that the mother and the daughter hammered him to death, especially since they didn't know who he was a stranger to them at that point until they found out his identity. So like, take a second, like step back, actually examine the situation, then you can act.
I liked what Elena said. I also feel that it was significant because the mom and sister actually felt guilty for what they did, which is the opposite of how Marcel felt. I went the way of comparing the man in the story's actions to Marcel's actions, is because they both had this decision that they made, or this action that they made in both stories, and they both were the actions were their own demise. Like, it made them spiral. Like, the man died in the story, and then Marceau is like in prison, probably not gonna come out. So that's how I compared them. Anybody else?
I think it also just goes to show like how much our actions like impact others, even if that's not even in like the framework of our mind. Like Marceau obviously didn't really think about how like him killing the Arab was going to affect like Marie or anybody like that was close with him, I guess. But I mean, it still did. So I think it just goes to show like how much we have to like not play the game necessarily, but just like think about, is this really like the best option? Which I guess is kind of like playing the game, but.
When we think about started this section of readings with Nietzsche, who's disturbing dark man. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Nietzsche is a whoa. But what Nietzsche was saying is that this idea that objectively every life has the same value and meaning. And that objectively there's good and objectively there's evil. It's like, that's a bunch of poppycock, right? I'm just gonna really paraphrase this loosely. But for Nietzsche, he said that has never been the case throughout history. The meaning and value that we give to human life, the meaning and value that we give to society, to good and evil actions, has always varied depending on who's in power, depending on all types of economic influences. And take a look at what's going on in this novel. An Arab is dead, and yet nobody really cares. Nobody's talking about it because in that society, an Arab's life just is not that meaningful or valuable. Does that make sense, everybody? And so the story is also kind of pointing that out. These people were willing to kill another human life because it was just some rich stranger, and only felt guilty when they realized it was a relative, when it was a quote unquote loved one. Does that make sense? Like, I think it's just highlighting and that sort of, to some degree, the hypocrisy of our culture, that on one hand is saying, oh no, we value all human life is valuable, it's meaningful, and that's objectively speaking. And a whole system that's built on, you know, like our judicial system, which obviously is not built on every objective life is meaningfully the same, valued the same. There are people throughout our history, people now who are going to be judged because of the color of the skin of the person they killed and the color of their skin of the person who did the actions. People judged because they're more beautiful, or they weigh more, or, you know, we all know this, right? I think we talked about this pandemic. And Nick, I think I asked you at some point, I think you spoke up when I said, do you think this pandemic, I mean, we just now crossed another milestone. Does anybody know how many Americans have died in this pandemic so far? Anyone want to?
250,000.
250,000. We passed, you know, it's 250,000 people have died. And what is that? 7 months? Laura, help me do the counting. I mean, imagine that.
Almost 9 months.
Almost 9 months, okay. So it's and I think we've asked this question, if 250,000 had died, but these were younger people, maybe whiter people, maybe wealthier people, would the conversation be different in this country? Because the majority of people who have been dying are the elderly and Black and brown people. And I'm just using straight up factual numbers here. And so I think it's an interesting kind of quandary. You know, on one hand, we want to say life objectively is meaningful and valuable. And if you kill somebody, that is a horrible thing. But when you take a look throughout our history, we take a look throughout human history, that has never been the case. That we as a society impose meaning and value on a situation, even on human life, that is not objectively ascertained somehow, that we're always imposing that value. And I think that story from Czechoslovakia kind of highlights that. It was only meaningful after they realized who they killed. They only felt those emotions after they. So in some ways, at least Meursault is like, he doesn't care that his mom died, and he didn't care about the Arab either. I mean, I guess at least he's not hypocritical, you know, like
He's consistent.
He's consistent, right, Reagan? Like consistently, like, but I think that's another reason we're going to see this play out in the court system with Meursault in the last couple of chapters.
I think
you can definitely.
Go ahead. Sorry. And this is like what I think. I think personally, like no matter how much as people, sorry, Mary. Okay. No, so basically, no matter how much we try to, you know, be ethically perfect, so we have these morals and standards that are set in place, I think we can all agree that humans naturally are going to make mistakes. I think, like with what Camus is trying to say is that, like, in the real honest world, like all of our ethical boundaries that society places, like, don't really do anything, because at the heart we are greedy, and we'll do things for our own desires. You know, we're not going to care about other people that we don't know, because those other people are objects. You know, to us, they're not anything. We don't know them. They're the stranger, essentially.
I think we can definitely make a correlation with this scenario and the Dutchman, what happened at the ending, how everybody was like, the woman was like, take him away. And they were like, okay. His life wasn't valued as much as the white woman. So
Really good connection, Olivia. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was Amiri Baraka's point, you know, in writing that play was, you know, here's a Black man who was trying, you know, willing to play the game in order to save his life. And once that slipped a little bit, then his life wasn't of much value. Yeah, so what's interesting to me is how the magistrate and is kind of treating Meursault. For example, he tells Meursault, I'm gonna flip to the page now, but he tells Meursault here, on page 68. He wants Meursault to accept God, right? That he like brings out a crucifix. And then he says, do you know what this is? I said, yes, of course. Speaking very quickly and passionately, this is on page 68, if I didn't mention that. Speaking very quickly and passionately, he told me that he believed in God and that it was his conviction that no man was so guilty that God would not forgive him. But in order for that to happen, a man must repent. And in doing so, become like a child whose heart is open and ready to embrace all. And when that line, become like a child whose heart is open and ready to embrace all, it struck me as interesting. And then he says he was leaning all the way over the table. He was waving his crucifix almost directly over my head. And then Meursault said, to tell the truth, I found it very hard to follow his reasoning. Very, very hard to follow his reasoning. And that the magistrate seemed particularly really interested in knowing why Meursault paused between the first shot and then the next four. Why does that matter? Why is that moment, why does that matter so much to Meursault's legal team? To understand what happened between that first shot and then the last four.
Because he had time to stop and reflect on what he did, and he still shot him 4 more times. Like, why would you do that if you're just like defending yourself in the moment or like anything that could be justified in law? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The pause could also be where they realize that, yeah, he shot once and he had the opportunity to walk away, but he also had, he could have had a deeper motive to shoot 4 more times. And it's not natural. Most people, as Kyle kind of pointed out, if they're defending themselves in the moment, most people just fire those 5 shots like back to back.
And it's like the air was already dead, like when he shot him, and so then he like paused him. So it's like, well, like why? Like, what was the point of shooting him 4 more times? Like, there obviously has to be like something that he was trying to like, I don't know.
And on page 69, this is Meursault's response. I was about to tell him he was wrong to dwell on it because it really didn't matter. How do you all deal with that?
Might just be another one of those times where he's just living in the present and he's like, I don't know. It happened.
Yeah. And even at the time of the shooting, right? He was like, so I did it. I paused, I shot again. And even at the time, it didn't seem like there was a conscious truth. There wasn't a definite cause and effect. And what people want him to do now is to look back, reflect back, and make up a reason is what they want him to do. Does that make sense, everybody? They need him. They want him to make up a reason. They want him to somehow justify his actions and to give some sort of explanation. And I think we talked about this last class, like we have this need, right? Because we don't like to dwell in uncertainty. We like things to have a definite cause and effect in our lives. And I've heard this again and again and again, you know, even now, if somebody I know has cancer or gets really sick, you know, people are really trying to figure out, well, you know, she did drink a lot. Oh, well, you know, she smoked when she was younger. Oh, well, you know, she was never a really good eater, or she didn't exercise as much, or she didn't blah, 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 blah. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like the people around somebody who's sick, I can see them like desperately grasping for a reason that somebody could get that sick. Because it's just too scary for all of us to think that we could be making quote unquote the right choices, and it doesn't matter. That we could walk into a doctor's office and be told you've got 6 months to live. That's just too scary for us to contemplate. So if we can find the reasons for bad things happening to other people, or find the reasons for other people doing bad things, then we feel like we have a little bit more control over our, you know, our own fates, and a little bit more control over our own actions, that it won't be possible for us to do something this monstrous, right? That monstrous spontaneity doesn't exist in me. You know, I do things because I'm reasonable. Like there's always a cause and effect for a reason I do things.
Yeah, it's easier to say stuff about other people, but instead of like saying it about ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. Because if it, you know, it's sort of a house of cards, and if you take a couple of those cards away, these beliefs that we have so that we can wake up in the morning and get through our lives, you start taking those cards away, man, the whole thing starts to tumble. And so I think that's why he's so, like I keep saying, he's like a destabilizing force, right? Because he's really making us question, like, are we really like this? I mean, again, and we've talked about with love, and like, yeah, sure, I love my mom, but does it really matter? Meaning at the end of the day, you know, we have people in our lives that we say we love, but at the end of the day, what have we done specifically? What sacrifices have we made in our lives for the person that we supposedly love? Does that make sense, Reagan? Does that make sense, Olivia? You know, it's really easy to say you love somebody. And it's really easy to spin a story about how you love somebody. But, you know, and if he did care about his mom, it didn't matter enough for him to make the sacrifices in his life to take care of her. It just didn't. And he's not going to lie about it. He's not going to pretend otherwise. And that's why he's so like scary for some of us. Can you just say that you loved your mom, please? Can you just say that?
You just pretend.
Yeah, can you just pretend? Because it makes me feel a whole lot better. You know? For me. Beautiful. And the last thing I wanted to point out was on page 69, in a low voice, the magistrate seemed, you know, was like really tired after, and like, because Merceau would not budge, right? I have never seen a soul as hardened as yours. And I guess the question I want to throw out to you, do you all see Merceau as a hardened soul? Is that how you would describe him? Do you see his soul as being hard? Do you see him as a man whose heart is not open?
I feel like it's more open than people would usually open it. I feel like he's showing his, like he doesn't have a veil. And the magistrate just doesn't understand that. He has the same thoughts. He has to have the same thoughts, but it's just.
I know, and on one level, Olivia, like he's done this terrible thing. He has shot another and killed another human being, right? And yet I have a hard time seeing him as hardened. It seems like he's open and accepting of, you know what I mean? Like he seems like out of all the characters, he seems very childlike in some ways, you know? Living in the moment, kind of just open, like a 2-year-old. You know, I remember my nephew coming over to play with Nora when they were very, very young. This is my nephew and my daughter. And they were playing together, and he took up this little toy hammer as one that goes beep, 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 beep when you hit. But he just went up to Nora and he was like, beep. Why did he do that? I don't know, Reagan. I don't know, Olivia. In that moment, he just kind of wanted to. She was annoying him for some reason. He was just like, boop, you know? I mean, Marisol, it kind of reminds me of Miss Sarah. Like, he had a gun. This guy was annoying. The sun was in his eyes. Boom, shot him. There wasn't much like conscious thought before. It wasn't a very adult thing to do. Like, as far as everybody, I'm like, he's kind of like a child with an open, you know, I don't know if I would consider him hardened, but at the same time, how can that square with what he did? And I think that's what we're all wrestling with. You know?
Another thing that I want to point out is that we're also asking from the point of the magistrate, who, again, as we know, is Christian, and those beliefs, like, obviously Marceau is different than that particular Christian believer. So because he doesn't match the same mold, to him he is hardened. And then going back what we said earlier, we also know Marceau as he was before killing the Arab, whereas this Christian person does not. So to him, he doesn't fit the mold. He doesn't feel sorry. He doesn't love his mom, apparently, and he's killed someone. So to him, he looks hardened.
That's right. That's right. Beautiful. At the very end on page 17, I don't remember if you remember this, but the nurse during his mom's funeral said, if you go slowly, you risk getting sunstroke. But if you go too fast, you work up a sweat and then catch a chill inside the church. And Mircea says she was right. There was no way out. and this seems to play a part throughout this novel, that the nurse is saying, if you walk too fast through the sun, you get sunstroke. But if you don't go fast enough, or if you go too fast, if you go too slowly, you'll get sunstroke. If you go too fast to work up a sweat, you'll get a chill inside the church. That there's really no way to win in this universe. That no matter what, you're gonna die. No matter what, you're probably gonna lose out. Like, there's no way to evade or avoid what's all coming for us. And he's thinking about that at the end. There was no way out, and no one can imagine what nights in prison are like. He even says that before he kills the Arab, he said, you could either shoot or you could not shoot. Those are like, but either way, it ends up the same.
I think it's basically like we're eternally bounded by our actions. Like, once we have made an action, like, we can't change that. We have to live within the constraints of what we have done. So, and I find that interesting how, like, existentialists believe that we are freedom. We do our actions, and even though we are free, our actions ultimately decide our future. So,
Right.
What is confusing about that is, even if you want to change that action, so say you want to go against that, and you have the freedom to do so, you can't, because you are bounded by what you did. So it's very, very paradoxical.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it, Nick. I love it. And it's also like when at the very beginning, when they keep asking him questions about his mom, and he's like, why are you asking me? It seems like my case is really simple. I shot a man. I shot him 5 times. Done and done. Like, to him, that's how, you either shoot or you don't shoot. He shot, done. And to everyone else, they want to try to impose all this kind of layers and layers and layers of meaning and the motivation and everything else. And I think that's also part of the tension here. All right, you guys are brilliant. Olivia and Reagan, yay, thank you. You guys did a wonderful job. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope you get outside, walk around a little bit, take advantage of today and tomorrow. I think the weather's supposed to be beautiful. Please do that. You're all such wonderful people, and I want you to stay healthy mentally and physically and emotionally and everything else. All right, everybody, have a great, great, great vacation.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.